My name is Anne Cooper. I'm a coffee roasting consultant, trainer and roaster based in Melbourne, Australia. Now, this is the last in a series of 5 videos, and in case you missed the first few videos, the first one was just an introduction of myself, my career so far, and also an introduction to the main topic for this series, and that's something I like to call Beyond the Cooling Tray. Pretty much everything that we're focusing on besides the actual physical roasting task process itself. How do we know we're doing okay? Are we on the right track? But basically, are we setting ourselves up for success every time we step up to the roaster? So we started by looking at getting to know our machine, and then knowing our green, and then knowing our flavors. So we're going to finish the series by getting to know our data. Now, we've all heard the saying, data is knowledge, knowledge is power. And you really can't get much clearer than that, especially in the world of roasting. Now, there is the wrong and the right kinds of data that we should be collecting while we're roasting. And it is really important in general anyway, in any way, form whatsoever, that we're giving ourselves a chance to write down as much information as possible so we can support ourselves and really quantify what it is that we're sensing while we're roasting. So look, some roasters do unfortunately write down the wrong information, like they're definitely going through the motions of writing things down. But the most common thing I see in my consulting and training is seeing just the wrong kind of data being collected. So I would definitely want to try and offer some good practical tips and tricks on what is the right kind of data that we should be focusing on to allow ourselves to be successful every time when we're roasting. Data collection is also great to make sure we've got that with us when we're doing our tastings and our evaluations. So again, if we don't have the right kind of data, then we're not going to be able to make a really good decision on whether we feel we need to fix a roast, how do we fix it, and where a potential issue might be coming from. So good data collection is great for troubleshooting. It can really help highlight any potential limitations in your machine because you might have a specific profile or flavor intention in mind. And if you find that your machine just can't deliver that profile for you, then great, you can tick that box and know where to start directing your attention in terms of trying to fix something to help you achieve what you want to achieve in the cup. But I also wanted to make a note that I'm not going to focus on and talk about specific software applications out there because it's important to recognize that not everybody likes using them or has access to them. So I'm definitely going to try and offer some good practical hands-on material that I always use in my roasting, in my consulting, and I also really encourage other roasters to do the same as well. So one of the things, so sort of like, you know, going back through the structure of where we started with our videos, should probably start with knowing our green. So in terms of the kind of data I would use to help support me with my green side of things is definitely using the CQI and the SCA classification forms. And it's really good because it is important to recognize where not all of us are operating in a protocol, you know, kind of bubble. But if you do need to, you know, give some feedback about a product, especially your green, that's where it's really great to make sure that you've got the right kind of information and the right kind of data recorded. So with knowing our green, we definitely spoke about, I really encourage you to definitely do your measurements because by quantifying what you're potentially then seeing as feedback in the roaster, that will then also help you better understand, you know, what's going on with that green. Is it drying out too quickly? Did you just not think about the roasting approach appropriately because you didn't recognize the properties in the green? And the most common thing I see with roasters is if they're having trouble roasting a coffee, it's because they haven't done their measurements. And so they're like, you know, really scratching their head, trying to work out what to do. But you can alleviate all of that stress by doing your measurements. And if you do have any issues, you know, with your coffee and you need to give feedback to the traders, Again, I definitely recommend referring to the SCA classification form and just try your best to write down what you're finding, because look, as roasters, I guess humans in general, we are always quite guilty of eating with our eyes and making a quick judgment without backing it up with any form of, data collection and quantifying. Another thing I like to do, and it's also good to remember, especially if you're an owner-operator and you've been operating on your own for a while and you need to seriously consider about employing another person, again, the value in documenting as much as possible. You will thank yourself that you have written down as much as possible. And definitely things like, I will always write down my measurement protocol and my techniques, like how do I do a density measurement? How do I do a moisture reading? How do I calculate certain things in my roast profile? So then you've got that information documented for your potential new employee, and it will make it a lot easier for you in terms of training and education as well. So documenting any good key measurement steps is really great as well. Okay, so this is definitely something, the next document is something I like to call the daily roast log. Now, again, recognizing, look, with the software applications, some of them do have some very powerful data collection abilities, but it's more about the format in which you're seeing that information. So you can most definitely record key information, whether it be on your computer in an Excel spreadsheet, or you can bring up the report from that software application. Something I like to do for myself is more of a manual document for my daily roast log, where I'm actually writing down key events, checkpoints, milestones throughout the roast profile. So this is definitely a document that has really helped in my consulting and training, and really helping roasters connect with their roasting style, their profile, and the flavors, and defining their roasting style and flavors as well. So this daily roast log is also fabulous to have next to you when you're doing your production roast evaluations as well. So because it has a summary of all of the key events, you'll go to taste a coffee and then you'll very quickly work out whether it's within your intended spec for the flavor intention of that particular coffee. So here's an example of a document already filled out, and you can see then what will happen. You'll start to see patterns in the data as you're looking down. So especially if you're doing a whole roasting session on just espresso roasting, and if you know that your roasting style is then connected to a certain set of parameters, then your parameters will then be reflected in the information that you're collecting on your roast log. So, and this is great to have then next to you when you're cupping and tasting. So then you can then, if you really like a coffee, then I would highlight the coffee on the roast log. And then I know that that's the profile that I need to stick to in terms of better defining my flavors. So as a roaster, I started doing a daily roast log. Oh my goodness, it would easily be almost 10 years, definitely for 10 years now. And it's the best thing ever that I've done for myself with my roasting. Again, I totally understand there's a lot of, software applications and other electronic ways of doing that. But, having that tangible bit of information next to you is incredibly valuable. Now, that daily roast log needs support. So yes, it is a summary of key milestones and events in the profile, but what it's also a reflection of is your individual roasting style, your ethos, everything that you want to do with your roasting. Now, that will also be connected to, as we spoke about with knowing your machine, it's going to be connected to your specific probe, because that probe is going to bring along with it specific data. That data is then going to be connected to the way that you map yourself your way through a profile, which then creates specific flavors. So one thing that I do in the roasting course, and I really encourage roasters to do, is to create what I call, it's a parameters chart. So basically it's a way to help us better understand, more than anything, how to finish a roast. because the most terrifying part of roasting is you're standing there, the beans are cracking, and you're going, I really need to do something right now. I need to make a decision on how to finish this roast. And it's quite terrifying if you don't know what to look at, what to sense. You can use your sensory, yes, 100%, but having that backup and quantification from your data can really solidify and help you make a very positive endpoint decision on how to finish that roast. So based on the daily roast log, highlighting the flavors that we like, then we'll be able to then summarize that data into a chart. So then you can better differentiate between a sample roast, a filter roast, and an espresso roast. But definitely remembering that data is very much dependent on the probe, so its thickness, its type, and its positioning in the roaster. So yeah, creating a parameters chart for yourself is really, really fabulous in terms of defining your final flavors. What it also helps to reinforce as well, and this is something that we'll touch on in my roasting course in Portland with Lee's Map It Forward event, is steering us away from defining our roasting in terms of it is really dangerous to define your roasting just by the development ratio percentage. So we've got to really understand that ratio percentage is just a snapshot of one section, one part of the profile. It's not defining how you got there, the entire profile. So that development ratio percentage, it needs support from other data points, and those data points are coming from your probe. So that's definitely the kind of things we'll touch on in the roasting course. And then of course, doing your production evaluations. So I'm quite passionate in helping roasters understand, again, coming back to knowing your flavors, in terms of you need to go into your production roast evaluations with an expectation of what the coffee should taste like. So you've got a specific product, you've created it, for a market, so it has an intended end flavor. So you need to go into that tasting knowing what to look for, and you need to support yourself with good data and documents so you can then record what you're interpreting and tasting in that evaluation. Now, the biggest mistake I've seen in, I guess you could say, like data collection with production roast evaluation in roasting, is roasters scoring their production roasts. Now, unfortunately, by using the quality score that's connected to the SCA 80-point cupping form, unfortunately, that's not the best way to be evaluating your production roasts, because production roasting evaluation is all about assessing the levels of intensity that should be present in the cup. How have we, as roasters, influenced a specific intensity of a specific quality that we want to find in the cup? So if you're roasting for espresso, for example, I would go into an evaluation expecting the intensity, for example, for acidity to be in the low to medium range. And then for all of the other qualities in terms of whether it's body, sweetness, flavor, aftertaste, balance, all of those, really sugar browning, yummy elements to be more in the medium to high intensity range. And then depending on whether it's, a specific origin, are you roasting for milk-based? Are you roasting for single origin espresso? That will have its own unique data points and evaluation expectations as well. If I'm roasting for filter, then of course, naturally, I would be looking for the acidity to be in the medium to high range, but the other attributes, the other qualities may have some different levels of intensity based on specifically the origin and the process and which specific flavor are you wanting to express in the end cup. Sounds intense, doesn't it? But really, more than anything, I really want to encourage roasters, please stop scoring your production evaluation roasts, particularly using the SCA and the CQI 80-point grading cupping form, because we're actually degrading the quality and the value of that cupping form. It's not allowing us to properly connect with what it was created for. And it was created for purchasing and character evaluation, of greens. So we can then assign, some quality and then a price to that coffee. and it's just not relevant to production roast evaluation. So documents I like to use for myself then for production roast evaluation is a form like this, which is then has all of the individual qualities, but then I'm then assessing the levels of intensity that I would want to see in the cup in terms of low, medium and high. And then my final decision point is it true to taste? So I've actually taken away the value point of balance, and I've put true to taste in at the end, because for me, true to taste, it's the absolute essence of why we're doing a production roast evaluation. It's the absolute support of all of the data, our roasting profile, our roasting approach, because at the end of the day, we're asking ourselves, is it true to taste? Is it tasting the way it's supposed to taste as the intended end product? So having a much more simple, very targeted, focused production evaluation form like this really helps you move through your cuppings and tastings a lot more smoothly. You're not stressed about trying to move through a really complicated scoring form as well. And it really allows you then to connect back to your daily roast log, your parameters, because if something is out of spec, so I've been clearly, we want the true to taste. True to taste should always be 3. So 1 is not ideal, 2 is kind of like okay, and 3 is yes, that's exactly where it should be. So because it's basically saying we've either nailed our roast profile or we didn't. So if it's, sitting in the 2 range because we missed the mark a little bit, we affected our expectation on the intensity on one of those qualities, we can very easily go back to our daily roast log, see which data point is not within spec, does it not meet then the parameters chart, and then we know how to go back to our roast profile and fix it. So another thing I also really love to do with my evaluation is to have a master evaluation form of expectations laid out. This is really great when you have a roasting team cupping and tasting and evaluating together. And if you have a master evaluation form in place, so when you come to the end of the evaluation and the tasting and you start discussing the results, if you have someone that's a little bit out of spec with their evaluation, you can help show them the master evaluation so they can keep on improving and better learning how to, they might be having trouble assessing acidity, or they might be having trouble assessing body, and they've just gone completely in the opposite direction to everybody else in their assessment. So having a master evaluation form of your products and the intended expected flavors is fabulous in definitely those roasting team environments, but look in general for all production roast evaluations. So you'll see, again, this is an example of me just filling one out manually so you can see what it would look like. It's very easy to use, and it allows you to focus on your tasting and your evaluation. You're not so stressed about, again, filling out a form that's too intense and really, really scary, and you're not so nervous about adding up scores and getting it wrong and all that kind of stuff. So really allows you to focus on that. And finally, the main thing that we'll be focusing on again in the event, the Map It Forward event in Expo in Portland, is the roast profile information in terms of data collection. So one key document that we will be referring to is the anatomy of a roast profile, and we're also going to be also calling anatomy of a roast curve. So this data is something that I created in terms of helping roasters really understand where in the roast profile specific flavors are coming from. And then if they change the timing of certain key events in the roast profile, then they will better understand why the flavors are where they're supposed to be. But this anatomy of a roast profile and curve document is definitely something that we will go into a lot more depth at the event in Expo. And then some other supporting documents that I will also refer to is just things like with heat transfer, how do we move our way through a roast in terms of heat application, and definitely, of course, bearing in mind specific systems and their needs, and of course, different probes and the data that comes along with that. So with all of that, we can really see with this, this topic of beyond the cooling tray, there's a lot of information that we need to support ourselves with before we even step up to the roaster. So every time we roast, there's always a really solid checkpoint of things that we need to remember. So especially in terms of knowing our machine, knowing our green, and then knowing the flavors, and then knowing the right kind of data that we want to collect, because all of that put together is what we're doing every time we roast. And it is a great way to set ourselves up for success every time when we're roasting. So thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the series of videos. And again, I really want to recognize, I totally understand not everything. There was not a chance to touch on everything. This was just an opportunity just to throw out some tips and tricks, a way for you to get to know me a little bit better. If you want to learn a little bit more about myself even more, you can find me on Instagram. I'm Roastress Coops. And on my website, I'm eqmr.com.au, and I've got lots of really great information, lots of really great articles. So if you go to the articles page, I've got heaps of great information that I've written on there. If you really like the t-shirts that I've been wearing, I've also got an I Love Coffee Teas site or page, and all of the profits go to Coffee Kids. So it's something that I've been really quite passionate about supporting for quite some time. So it'd be really cool if you like the t-shirts, hop onto the page and grab a t-shirt. And again, thanks for listening.